Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. Top story continues to be the Moscow attacks claimed by ISIS. Day of mourning in Russia as the toll from the concert hall massacre climbs to 137 people. Now, we've all had a couple days to look at the pictures, look at the videos, make a decision for ourselves. And many experts, like the Institute for the Study of War, have concluded that the Islamic State very likely is responsible for the Caucus City Hall attack near Moscow. Tactics like those deployed in the 2015 Paris attacks were replicated in the Caucus City assault, lending weight to the Islamic State's claim. People who support Russia want to blame Ukraine. People living in the West want to blame the FSB. But ISIS has the motive. The Russians in Syria have been fighting them for almost a decade. So I'm about 70% convinced this was just ISIS being ISIS. But there are so many weird things that happened during this mass shooting. The first one is the blue men. People have been analyzing these pictures and videos and noticing there's a lot of guys in the audience of this concert hall wearing blue sweaters, wristwatches, and blue jeans. And all of these men don't seem particularly alarmed that there's a mass shooting going on. You can see all the other people not wearing blue sweaters, trying to make it to the exits. But you've got this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. It just seems like if there was FSB officers at this event orchestrating the entire thing, these men don't look like they're surprised a mass shooting is going on. And I'm going to have to cover up part of this image, but this man in particular, once again, blue sweater, wristwatch, blue jeans, he looks identical to one of the FSB officers who captured one of the suspects close to the Belarus border. Is this the exact same man? Given that it's the internet, I feel like this civilian, if he is a civilian, could be quickly identified, and it's not the same guy. But it does really look like the same guy. A bizarre thing for me is the fact that these four gunmen got back in the same vehicle that they arrived in. They then drove almost 7 hours, once again going towards the Belarus border. I don't imagine how they would have gotten into Ukraine. But they never switched vehicles. They had guns. They easily could have stole someone else's vehicle so that they would be harder to find, harder to catch. But the question is, who told them to drive south, making it look like they were going to Ukraine? How was Russian security forces able to track these guys down in the woods? If there wasn't already a tracking device on the car, and they knew exactly where these guys were the entire time as they drove for 7 hours trying to get to Belarus. We talked about this in the last video, the fact that the National Guard Service, their headquarters was a 5-minute drive down the street, and none of these guys showed up for 90 minutes. The building was on fire. Everyone was calling in to emergency services that there was this mass terrorist attack, and these guys never showed up. And it gets even weirder. This is Caucus City Hall. This is the concert hall where the roof collapsed. In the adjacent building, the Caucus Expo, there is the Pavshino Police Department. There was a police department right next to the city hall with an armory. They had weapons. And the police officers chose to remain in their office. People are screaming and running, and the building's on fire, and these police officers never walked around the building to respond to the mass shooting for 90 minutes. There's also the question of how did these four Tajik citizens get their hands on automatic weapons? The weapons that they used is the AK-101. This is a variant of the AK-74. And only Russian security forces use these weapons. So sure, it's possible they got their hands on them, or someone gave them the weapons after they flew in from Istanbul and landed in Moscow. If Russia wants to do a real investigation, figure out where they got these weapons from. That's a pretty big mystery. This is the billionaire that owns Caucus City Hall. Of course, he's friends with Donald Trump. His name is Aris Aglarov, and he's now being criminally investigated. Why? The fire and ventilation systems of the concert hall didn't work. The emergency exits and fire stairwells were locked, and the alarm system never went off. Was this incompetence? Was this corruption? Or was the FSB in control of all the building systems the entire time? I don't know. I'm still leaning towards it was just ISIS acting alone, feeding this narrative that the FSB was responsible for it, makes Putin look more powerful, makes him look more in control. If the FSB was responsible for it, the Kremlin is fine with this narrative because it still makes Putin look powerful, even if he's butchering his own people. But to say that ISIS is capable of pulling this off without Russia's security forces uncovering it or stopping it, that makes Putin look weak. That makes the Russian system look very brittle. So I think going forward, I'm going to stick with the narrative that ISIS was solely responsible for this, and Russia's security apparatus is just completely incompetent, and they can't protect the Russian people. Endless wave of violence, leading Russian anti-torture activist on the concert attack suspect's treatment. I would love to show you pictures of the 4 gunmen. They were all taken alive, and they all appeared in court yesterday. But they had all been brutally tortured and beaten for like 2 days straight. So I don't think I can show you pictures of the 4 men. One of them was unconscious, probably in a coma, hooked up to a catheter. He was 19 years old. One of the men had his ears severed during the interrogation. And the other 2, one of them still had a plastic bag over his head from his interrogation. So Russia did this on purpose to send a message that we're Russia, we're tough, we're brutal. Anyone who tries to attack us, this is what's going to happen to you. I'll link the pictures down below if you want to see the state of these Tajik men appearing in Russian court. They definitely got a message across of how they treat people in Russia. Graphic photo shows Moscow attack suspect with pants down, wired to an electrocution torture device. Of course, because it's the Russians, there's a picture online. I'll link it down below, but yes, these men were brutally tortured. And I just want to say, torture doesn't actually work at getting reliable information. If you give them leading questions, such as, did Ukraine order you to do this? If you torture someone enough, they will confess to whatever you want them to confess to make the torture stop. So it's actually a good thing that Russia did these interrogations initially on camera and released the video. But honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if in a couple days, after more days of torture, these men start confessing that they met with President Zelensky himself. And President Zelensky gave them the secret orders to conduct the concert hall attack. So that's my prediction. That might be coming in the next couple days. Now, ISIS has responded to the treatment of their agents, saying that because of how they've been treated, more ISIS attacks will be planned in the future. To the credit of X, they keep taking down any posts from ISIS, so Natalka tried to share this image. Twitter has already taken it down. My question to Elon Musk is, what's the difference between ISIS terrorizing innocent civilians and Russia terrorizing innocent civilians? Why is ISIS's propaganda taken down and not Russia's propaganda? Kremlin refuses to comment on the Islamic State's links to the Moscow attack. This is the Kremlin's press secretary Peskov. They don't want to say the word ISIS. They don't want to say the word Islam, because this conflicts with their narrative that Ukraine is responsible for it. Putin, in a speech, did recognize that radical Islamists carried out the terrorist attack, but still claims Ukraine is somehow involved. Here's the quote I want to read from Putin's speech. This is pretty revealing. One thing is absolutely clear. The terrible crime committed on March 22nd in the Russian capital is, as I have already said, an act of intimidation. And the question immediately arises, who benefits from this? This atrocity can only be a link in a whole series of attempts by those who, since 2014, have been at a proxy war with our country using the neo-Nazi regime in Kyiv. Well, Vladimir Putin, if you use this terrorist attack as justification for mass mobilization, then yes, who does benefit from this terrorist attack in the capital city? Good question. But Russia's propagandists are doing the full court press. Margarita Simonyan of RT News every day is only saying one thing. Ukraine did it, Ukraine did it, Ukraine did it. So here's her interpretation of the ISIS attack. Those who organized it, Zelensky and all his cronies, are not human beings. They organized it. Don't let anyone tell you that it was ISIS. In no way was it ISIS. And the fact that the handlers of these chain dogs immediately in the evening, when it had just happened, when no one was caught yet, when no one knew yet, not even our own intelligence agencies, who did it. They immediately announced that it was ISIS, and now they are advocating the fact that it is ISIS. The reason why people in the West said ISIS immediately did it is because ISIS claimed responsibility on their social media accounts on Telegram. The four gunmen uploaded pictures and videos to a Dropbox that the official ISIS accounts had access to, and ISIS was publishing the first-hand pictures and videos from the attackers. Doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to solve that case. But Margarita's having none of it. The very fact that they are doing this means they are the ones who committed a fault, you see? It's obvious it's them right away. They knew in advance that the perpetrators of this terrorist attack could, as they say, die for ISIS, that they would be Islamists and that they would be quite suitable to pose them as ISIS. The United States tried to warn you guys. The United States gave the Russian government the intelligence that Islamic terrorists were in Moscow looking to attack a concert hall. Russia could have canceled some events. Russia could have increased security. Russia could have done any investigation at all to prevent these attacks. And they chose to do nothing. You're welcome, Russia. So, of course, Russian soldiers and Russian politicians are already signing artillery shells, saying this one's for the victims of the Caucus City Hall, and they're launching them against Ukraine, even though Ukraine had nothing to do with this. So what's the fallout? What's the blowback? Kyrgyzstan warns citizens against traveling to Russia after the concert hall attack. There's going to be repercussions for ethnic minorities and Muslims living in Russia. given that these 4 men were from Tajikistan, a Central Asian republic, and these men were Muslim, Russians are now increasingly wary and suspicious of these people. But Russia depends on migrants. Moscow terror attack could inspire a new wave of hate. These people from the Caucasus and from Central Asia come to Moscow and the big cities to find work, to find jobs. I don't imagine the working conditions are too good, but the pay and benefits is still better than their home countries. And these are the kinds of memorials and signs we're seeing. This sign at a makeshift memorial says, "Visa-free regimes kill." How this works is if you want visa-free travel to someone else's country, you have to allow it for their citizens to come to your country as well. So because Tajikistan is part of Russia's CSTO military alliance, they're part of their economic cooperative, yes, people of Tajikistan have visa-free entry into Russia. And people in Russia have visa-free entry into Tajikistan. You can show up at the airports and get, I don't know, like a 30-day, 60-day, or 90-day visa to travel or work. But there's already reports that police in Russian cities are rounding up migrant workers and just mass deporting them. I imagine citizens of Tajikistan are being targeted for reprisals, and they're being deported. Lots of videos online of Russians expressing racism and xenophobia. Here's a Russian girl who doesn't want to get out of her car and go into a shopping mall because there are turkeys. I'm a native English speaker. I don't know how bad this word is in Russia, but it's a slur for people from the Caucasus.
У меня, родители сегодня решили зачем-то поехать в Фуд-Сити. Я сказала, что извините, но я в здание туда не пойду, я останусь в машине. На всякий случай. Потому что, вон там, видите, сколько чурок, реально, просто чурки. Вот. И мне как-то страшно стало идти,
There's no subtitles, but you can hear her saying the word, which is a racial slur. Here's another video of some Russian men accosting a Yakut woman on the subway station.
А ну-ка, давай-ка, уёбывай отсюда! Россия для русских, Москва для москвичей, Африка для негров, помойка для хачей. Слава Тесакову!
This is the famous Moscow subway that Tucker Carlson loves so much. And we've got these nice young men giving Nazi salutes to intimidate ethnic minorities just trying to go to work. Africa is for Negroes. Russia needs these people. They need the migrant labor to keep their economy going, especially in wartime when so many Russian men who should be working in factories are being drafted instead. And concerning Russia's minorities, 6.5% of their country is Muslim. There's been this delicate balance between the Orthodox Church and the Muslim minority of Russia, but there might be more provocations. There might be more incidents where the Muslim minority of Russia doesn't appreciate how they're being treated by the ethnic Russian majority. And where's Kadyrov? I've not seen any clips of him condemning these terrorist attacks. Something tells me that Kadyrov wants nothing to do with ISIS, and he's keeping his mouth shut. Let's switch over to the military map, and there's not been a lot of action. The city of Avdiivka fell over a month ago, and Russia continues to gobble up these small fields, making their way towards this water barrier. Ukraine has built new defense lines on the other side of this river. But in general, with all the snow melting, it's mud season in Ukraine again. Russia is amassing new forces for a summer offensive. We don't know how bad it's going to be, but hopefully Ukraine's got a couple months to prepare, and we can get additional military aid passed for Ukraine before then. And this is a goofy story. Russia's golf cart troops don't stand a chance. An all-terrain vehicle is no substitute for an armored vehicle. Last year, China, being this great ally of Russia, sent them over 2,000 of these golf carts for the Russian military to use. China really shouldn't be helping Russia at all, but this is like the bare minimum China could be doing for Russia. And the Russians are crazy enough to be using these golf carts in combat. There are videos appearing online of the Russians trying to assault Ukrainian positions in golf carts with no armor or protection. The question then is this better than charging on foot? And maybe slightly, but it's still a suicide mission, and Russian commanders are still sending their troops to die in these meat wave attacks. Restoration of Ukraine's Dnipro hydroelectric power plant will take years following the Russian missile attack. The machine hall was destroyed, and a new one should be constructed. While some equipment should be manufactured from scratch, it is expected to take at least 2 years. 4 or 5 nights ago, the Russians hit this dam with 8 cruise missiles. Thankfully, the dam wasn't breached, but the damage to the power generation rooms is extensive. Ideally, Ukraine needs a break. They need the Russians to stop attacking it. They need better air defense systems to hope to begin the process of repairing this hydroelectric power station. Over 200,000 residents have no electricity in the city of Kharkiv due to Russian attacks on critical infrastructure. Given that Ukraine's resources for their air defense systems are depleting, they're making tough decisions: when to shoot down a missile and when not to shoot down a missile. So a lot of power transformers were destroyed by the Russians, and significant parts of major cities are now without power. Here's a report from Michael. He's a global affairs analyst with the Atlantic Council. Here's his report on the ground in the city of Odessa, where significant parts of the city have lost power. He's currently in a grocery store.
Now, to give you an idea of the huge losses businesses are going to be taking, I mean, look at behind me, the refrigerators are off. A store clerk was pulling meat and other perishables out earlier. I don't know what they're going to do with it, probably toss it. But this power outage hit with a lot of businesses. This one usually has full power, but a lot of them have been hit without warning, and the losses are going to be huge, clearly. I talked to one of the store clerks, and she said, yeah, a lot of this stuff has to be thrown away. They have a generator, but it's being used to preserve what they can. And it's also what's called a point of invincibility. People can come here. Over there's a table where people can charge their phones. But no street lights. Only the very lucky are with power. And more bad weather is predicted tomorrow, including strong winds. So this...
Bad weather being strong winds. At least it's not December or January. It is warming up, it's springtime, but yeah, not having electricity, not being able to refrigerate anything. A lot of these businesses in these major cities can't operate unless they have their own dedicated generator. Ukraine reportedly shot down 2 Russian unique Zircon missiles. The wreckage will allow experts to assess the technology and capabilities. So some of these missiles have been getting through. Here's a statement from President Zelensky. I am grateful to Ukraine's emergency service rescuers, police, utility workers, and all other services involved in rescue and recovery following Russia's attack on Kyiv this morning. Russian terrorists launched ballistic missiles at Kyiv. Unfortunately, houses in a typical urban neighborhood were damaged. As of now, 5 people have been reported injured. The rubble is still being cleared. So what's Russia's mighty military victory? Using their hypersonic Zircon missile. What did they get? And they got a school building. This building collapsed right here. This is in central Kyiv. Is the Vasily Bachuk Art Academy and local gymnastics school for children. Now Russia's going to claim this was a NATO command base and they just killed 30 NATO generals. Luckily, none of the children were at the school because it was spring break. But yes, this was a dance studio for gymnasts. Okay, U.S. politics. So Mike Johnson has sent the House into recess for 2 weeks for Easter. And Speaker Johnson is now telling House Republicans who support Ukraine that once they come back in early April, he's going to allow a vote on something for Ukraine. This is important, but I want everyone to remember Speaker Mike Johnson is a liar. And if he allows a vote on something, then it's a trap. The simplest thing to do, allow an up or down vote on the Senate's version of Ukraine aid, and it'll pass. But what Speaker Mike Johnson is going to try and do to waste more time is craft a House version of the bill that he knows won't get 60 votes in the Senate. 30 Senate Republicans are going to vote no matter what. So the goal is to make something that Senate Democrats won't like, so that if the House passes something, it'll then die in the Senate. He can waste easily another 2 months doing this. So Speaker Johnson's a liar, and hopefully he loses his job. Marjorie Trader Greene did initiate a motion to vacate the chair, but I honestly think she's going to back off of this, and there won't be a vote to remove Speaker Johnson. And the reason why is the House GOP caucus is falling apart. Another House Republican announced he's quitting Congress early, depriving the Republicans of their majority. This is House Republican Mike Gallagher from the state of Wisconsin. And he announced he's going to quit Congress at the end of next month, so it'll be too late to organize a special election to fill that seat before November. This is pretty genius, and I think there might be a couple more House Republicans who are going to do the exact same thing. And when the Democrats take over the House, Hakeem Jeffries can schedule a vote on the Senate's version of the bill. This is very likely to happen, in my opinion, in the next month. Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. And Iceland said they would join the Czechs' initiative to buy shells for Ukraine, and they're kicking in 2 million euros. Not a lot of people in Iceland, but if you're watching this and you're from Iceland, thank you so much for your contribution. Final feel-good clip, if you can call it a feel-good clip, is a Ukrainian woman working at a coffee shop, and the windows were blown out by a Russian missile attack. And she still chose to go to work and to serve people coffee because life must go on.
Вони ще всі живі, і наша кав'ярня також частково жива, і ми робимо каву, ми працюємо, і тримаємося. Все буде добре. Якось так.
Ви вирішили працювати все одно попри те, що сталося?
Так, це відволікає, якщо чесно. І я сама люблю каву, я вірю, що люди хочуть каву. Тому чому б ні? Чому б ні? Навіть коли буквально перші хвилини після цього прильоту у нас був фільтр, ми почали всім роздавати фільтр. Стояло еспресо, яке під час вибуху готувалось. Це, я не знаю, це можливо для того, щоб інвалідити трошки людей. Ми продовжуємо жити, життя продовжується і все буде Україна. Наша перемога за нами, як це можна зламати? Наш прильот, ми працюємо, робимо каву.
Life must go on. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel.